for Mr Farage. Petros, where are you, Petros? Right at the back. Join with the questions, make the points, make the questions tight, make the answers pithy. Let's go for it. Petros, hi.
Yeah, so in the first time in a long time, we're finding that there are more people over the age of 65 in Britain than people under the age of 16. So in most countries, they would solve this problem by relying on immigration to fix this fiscal gap. Now, if immigration is, perhaps not your most favorite policy, how do you intend on solving the fiscal gap from an aging population and low fertility rates?
Well, there is one slight problem with the argument that if you have an ageing population, you need to have mass immigration to rebalance it. The problem is immigrants get old too. So actually, if you follow the logic of that argument, goodness knows where we'll be. I mean, one of the interesting things about this is population size and population density and quality of life. We've gone, just in 24 years, we've gone from 55 million people to 65 million people. And there's nobody that lives in the Greater London area that won't tell you that actually life is a bit more difficult than it used to be.
Difficult in what way?
Difficult in terms of transport, difficult in terms of getting around, difficult in terms of pressure on public services, difficult in terms of getting a GP appointment. So the point I'm making is that there are some quality of life issues here too.
I'll be about right with you. Barbara wants to come in here.
Yeah, if that's the case, how do we look after people in hospitals? Loads of people in hospitals are immigrants helping us out. How do you
Well, that's right. Actually, we have quite a lot of foreign doctors that come to the UK and nurses. I have to say, I think it's extraordinary that we're not training enough of our own nurses. I really don't understand why there is this huge gap. I really don't.
Graham over there.
Yeah, my experience is simply the fact that running a recruitment and search agency in North London, if we don't have access to, let's call it immigrant labour, and forgive me because it's kind of a non-PC phrase, but nonetheless, we don't have UK national people that want to pick up the reins and do the jobs at minimum wage and the jobs that perhaps historically the lower paid in the UK would have done.
Why is that, Graham, do you
Well,
think?
because they just don't want to work. And it breaks my heart because, if you sit in an office as a recruitment agency and you're looking for 10, 20 warehouse people, guess who turn up? It's not the British traditional nationals.
Graham, before 2004, we did not have a total open door to 8, now 10 former communist countries. And yet, the coffee shops were still manned.
There weren't as many, though, were they?
The cabbages,
coffee shops,
the cabbages didn't rot in the field. And the point I'm making is this. You're right. London is a particular problem because for people to come off benefit and go to work on minimum wage, frankly, they're probably better off staying on benefit. So the big problem here is having this big supply of migrant labour has made the minimum wage for many people the maximum wage, and that's a big part of this problem.
I think you're missing the point. The fact is that a lot of people that were born here, and I'm 52, do not want to do those jobs. And the only people that will do it are the immigrants coming in. We've had some terrific people from Romania.
Why don't they want to do those jobs, do you think?
Well, because they don't want to get their hands grubby. We put posters outside our office, come in. I
can't have. Yes, we do have some of our youth, who are lazy and hopeless, but equally, I travel around. Well, of course, but equally, But
what does that mean? Some of our youth are
hopeless? What it means
hopeless?
is that Tony Blair in 2004 first used the argument that Graham's using, that British youngsters are absolutely useless. I don't buy that.
I didn't say that. They're absolutely. Did I say that?
But you said they don't want to work.
Well, they don't want to do those kind of jobs. That's the point.
I go around this country and I meet lots of young people who want work and cannot get it.
Well, they're not applying for the jobs.
Let's go back to our original questioner, Petros. I see you want to come back in, and we'll spread it around after that. Go on.
I want to speak to that point, also the point that you said immigrants get old as well. Well, 80% of the immigrants that are coming to the UK are underneath the age of 35. So they're going to be net contributors to the economy. And on the point about not having UK nationals doing those kind of jobs, I think it's a matter of a skills mismatch. A comparative advantage for the UK and other developed countries is that they have a very well-educated workforce. So if you're going to have people with college degrees working those kind of jobs, at the end of the day, it's a skills mismatch. So you're not necessarily having a competition between
certainly
immigrants.
In areas like engineering, you're right. We have a chronic skill shortage in this country, and I can see in Graham's case, he would need to bring people in from outside. But I just want to make this point. What I'm arguing is for an Australian-style point system.
And a 5-year ban on unskilled immigration.
Which means bringing migrants into Britain who will benefit our country. And nearly every country in the world does this, and that's what we should be doing.
Can I just back this point, because it's interesting you brought that up, a 5-year ban on unskilled immigration. What about the unskilled immigration that we are desperate for?
We already have a huge amount of unskilled migrant labour in Britain already. I do not think it's acceptable for us to go on with a net migration figure of 300,000 people a year.
But I think with something on this as well is Rhys Mackenzie. Hello, Rhys. I think it's a question that you've got on food prices, which actually ties in to unskilled immigration and the people who actually pick the fruit, for example.
Yeah, because a lot of farmers in this country use EU migrants to pick the fruit during harvesting times because it's cheap labour and they're very hard-working people. And you have a lot of farmers saying that they've tried to employ British people to do this. If they do employ British people, they don't work as hard, they quit very quickly, and they want more money. So how are you going to prevent food prices from going up? Because the farmers will have to employ British people who will demand more pay.
Well, actually, the point about food prices is that because we're part of a common agricultural policy, we're not able to buy and access food on the global market at the cheapest available price. Look, I made the point earlier, before 2004, the cabbages did not rot in the fields. But I do accept one thing. I do accept one thing very clearly, and that is that since 2004, since we've had this flow of migrant labour, it has been very good for big corporate businesses. It's been very good for big landowners. It's been very good for the rich. It's
been very good for farmers in Lincolnshire.
Very good for very good for the rich, because what it's done is given them cheap labour. But what it's done overall to people on low-paid jobs in Britain,
that's wrong.
Well, wage compression over the last 10 years, has been very, very significant. And even before the Treasury Select Committee, people like Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, have said migrant labour has driven down the cost of labour in Britain.
If you've got running a business, I'm thinking about a client of mine, Quantrell Marketing in North London.
What business is
I run a recruitment and search business, and we supply people across a broadband. And they look for people that are reliable, can turn up every day, are going to pack boxes. This is fairly low skilled, but nonetheless, they need to have a complete mindset that focuses. And if I go into their warehouse, I look around, I talk to the MD, and he says, look, the majority of people are Eastern European or of Asian descent. And I say the question, well, and I know the answer, why haven't we got more English people in the business? He says, because they're not even applying for the jobs. And this isn't minimum wage. These ladies and gents are getting reasonable money. They're not youngsters. They're in their 40s and 50s. We're not getting the British people applying.
Well, let me throw it to Mark. I'll throw it right back to you. I think Mark's kind of broadly sympathetic to you, Nigel Farage.
Going back to your original question, the point's being missed. At the end of the day, if you're looking for money to actually support the country, the economy, get rid of the HS2, restrict the foreign aid budget, get out of Europe, and that money, 32 billion, put that back into our economy. You could spend that money by giving more money to carers, people with disabilities, improve the quality of life. You could cut VAT. You could give more childcare vouchers. So for me, that's how we could address some of the problems financially.
Will farm workers still be able to come into this country on temporary visas? Will it be exempt?
Now that's a different kettle of fish. If we need, I would make the point that we already have a huge number of people who come into this country to do those jobs on farms. There are many British people who want to work on those farms who now actually feel discriminated against, and I've had some very clear examples of that. But I would say this to you.
If they want to come in and pick your cabbages, which you keep referring to, will they still be allowed them?
Temporary work permits are fine. But I would make this point, if people come here on temporary work permits, they have to come here bringing their own health insurance. And that actually is what every country in the world does. And we've rather lost sight of that, I think, over the last few years.
So this 5-year ban on unskilled immigration is not actually a 5-year ban on
Well, it's a 5-year ban, unless we have a desperate shortage. But we do not have a shortage at the moment of people.
Come and sit in my office and try and
are there more farms this year than there were last year?
No, not farms. We're talking about office, warehouses.
Let's go to that guy back there. Sorry, I can't see your name. Your name, Ray.
Yeah. I was just saying, the constituency I'm in, we don't have an immigration issue, and just to contradict what you've said, I know it's different because we're in a different. I'm in Hastings and Rye.
Okay, yeah.
And
have you been in Hastings recently? There's
I
an
live in
awful lot of Eastern Europeans.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is that we do have the youth under 25s are applying for the jobs in Tesco's and the warehouses that we have. So that's not maybe the case, and it might be because Hastings and Rye is a bit cut off because we're not in the centre like London and have good transport links. So that doesn't make it as attractive for people outside the UK to maybe come into the area.
Yeah, that's true. Although, remember, that even in constituencies that are not directly affected by a large number of migrants, the price of labour has been driven down. And what I want to see is a rebalancing. And if that means that the rich get a little bit rich and the poor get a little bit better off, then I think that's probably quite a good thing.
The NFU at the end of last year said there already is a shortage of migrant workers. So it's interesting what they're saying. It's interesting what people's experiences on the ground are saying. Can I go to Barbara? Hello.
So would you increase the minimum wage?
There is a problem with doing that. And that is that if you increase the minimum wage, you may actually attract even more migrant labour. I mean, don't forget, the minimum wage in Britain... It would
help people in this country.
Well, hang on. The minimum wage in Britain is now 9 times what it is in Romania. So if you increase the minimum wage, even more people will want to come. I want to see the market adjust this. You know, I mean, frankly, if the current proposal to increase the minimum wage, which is the Labour proposal, is to put it up by 2019 to about £8 an hour. I don't think a marginal increase in the minimum wage is really going to make a difference. I think the minimum wage was designed to be a floor, okay, but it's actually become a ceiling. Unless we restrict the flow of migrant labour...
if you increase the ceiling, as you say, then if you had the choice of picking somebody for work who was either speaking English or had a problem with that, which would you pick?
I think
that really maybe would answer your question about...
I think if we do increase the minimum wage effectively,
so you would increase
we will just set a new glass ceiling. I don't think that's the answer.
Is that not a problem?
I think the answer is to have a labour market in which employers actually begin to have to pay a bit more.
That would do it.
I just think our society, in so many ways, is dividing more year on year on year. I mean, we really are back to the haves and the have-nots.
Why do you call it a glass ceiling? I'm confused from an employment point of view. You know, when we pay minimum wage, oftentimes we end up having to pay a little bit more anyway, just because we need more people.
Because for 1.5 million people, the minimum wage has effectively become the maximum wage.
We haven't heard from Nigel yet. Other Nigel in the audience.
The problem that I hear with that is we're at 6% unemployment or below, which means that effectively we're at full employment from some economists' point of view.
Not quite.
Depends on the definition that you look at. Your range is between 3 and 9. And so from looking at that, how do you fill the jobs that you create without having inflation, which raising all the minimum wages would have, without having migrant labour?
I don't actually think that having a small degree of inflation and having interest rates a little bit higher would be a complete disaster for the British economy. And let me just reiterate, you know, I want us to have a sensible, good immigration policy, but we shouldn't do it the way we are. We should do it on a skills-based, Australian-style point system so that we get people coming to Britain who we know are really going to benefit us. And actually, full employment would be about 2 to 2.5%, not 6%. So there are still quite a lot of unemployed people out there.
And we've got Daniel in Cardiff on the phones. Welcome, our first caller. Hello, Daniel.
Hello.
Good morning. What would you like to say?
Well, I think clearly costing is the second most important buzzword that UKIP are trying to get into the UK media at the moment. Can Mr Farage explain how UKIP have economically costed the return of up to 2.2 million British people back from the EU when he puts up all the barriers, considering these people will need housing, education, healthcare, jobs, and for many of them they'll need benefits. And as they all will probably speak English, they'll all be eligible for them.
Hang on. We are not pulling up the drawbridge. We're controlling who comes across the drawbridge. People...
Yes, but it's realistic to expect that European countries may well implement a similar Australian-style immigration system that you're proposing, if we're no longer in the EU. And even if only half of them come back, that's 1 million British people coming back on these shores who need help with things. How have you costed it? You can't just ignore it.
Well, very few of those people will come back because our relationship with the European Union changes. Most British people who are living in Europe are retired people living there, spending their pensions. I mean, it's quite interesting.
Suddenly require visas?
Well, you know, would the Costa del Sol not want the retired Brits there? I think it's a fairly obvious question.
Would we not want people to pick fruit in Lincolnshire? It's the same argument.
You don't need political union for people to live and work and settle in each other's countries. That's the